All right, friends, good morning, happy Friday, and welcome to another First Friday Facebook Live. For those of you who are with us just a minute ago, thanks for bearing with us. Technical difficulties sometimes happen, technology. Again, we are coming to you live today from our beautifully refreshed Sea Dragons team. And today we're going to talk a little bit about exhibit design. I will do my best to touch on everything. It's a pretty complicated process involving a lot of different people. So if you have questions, feel free to ask. I would love to answer them for you. And if I can't answer them for you in the moment, we'll answer them for you after our Facebook Live video. So first, let's start with the who. It involves a lot of different people, including development, visitor experience, education, marketing, communications, and many, many more. But the two major players that are involved are our fishes team and our design and exhibits team. So fishes, they're the ones that are ultimately taking care of these animals and maintaining these exhibits, like the one you're seeing here behind me. So what they're bringing to the table is their animal expertise in order to help inform design. This will include the aquarius supervisors, assistant curators, kind of the whole team coming together to make decisions about what is going to be best in our exhibits and how we can design those exhibits to best support our animals, because animal care always comes first. Then there is our design and exhibits team. So these are kind of two different groups working together. We have our folks who are designing the exhibits, taking everyone's ideas, kind of collecting them together and translating that into a physical design for these exhibits. And then we have the folks that bring those exhibits to life. So they're the ones that are actually building our tanks, building the habitats, installing them in place, thinking about all sorts of different challenges when it comes to the physical construction of these exhibits. So those are kind of the two major groups. For this tank behind me, our head aquarist for this gallery, his name is Jeremy. So he's the one taking care of these beautiful sea dragons. The gentleman who designed our tanks here at the aquarium, his name is Glenn, and then our amazing construction team that are both technical and artists, that would be Peter and Kaylee. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but first, how do we decide what we are going to put on exhibit here at the aquarium? So there's a couple of things that guide our overall choices. What we're looking for is to make unique, memorable, immersive exhibits that help to support our mission. So that's kind of the guiding principle, and it has to meet all of those requirements before we even start to think about the animals that are going to go into that exhibit. It kind of depends on what we have going on at the time. Sometimes our exhibit choices are to promote a new animal or something that we know we're getting or something that we would like to have here at the aquarium. Sometimes they're a little more reactionary. We have a tank that just needs some updating. So for example, like our octopus exhibit upstairs, those octopus just needed a new home, and so that became the priority that year. Behind me, this tank just needed a little bit of a refresh, and while we were doing some other construction in the building, we just took the opportunity to touch this one up as we went. So a lot of different things go into choosing why we're doing it and then what. Some other things that get factored in: animal health. Again, I mentioned this already. Animal health is always our first priority. So there's a whole team of people that decide what we can have here at the aquarium. We have to have animals that are going to thrive in zoos and aquariums. So this kind of goes back to our animal care team, our fishes department, kind of what animals are going to thrive in an aquarium environment, and do we have the space to display them properly and give them a habitat that is suitable here at the New England Aquarium. Other things we have to think about: can the floor hold up the tank? On the second floor, third floor, and fourth floors, these become a little bit more important. Fortunately, the first floor is pretty sturdy, and so we can have some really big tanks on the first floor, and we'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. Some other things that you want to think of: the type of animal. So for example, the animals behind me are living in a round tank. Do we want a round tank or a square tank? This has a lot to do with animal behavior. So for an animal like a herring that has a circular swimming pattern, we're not going to put those guys in a square tank. This also works with jellyfish. Next time you come visit us at the aquarium, check out our jellies exhibits. All of those tanks, even if they look square from the front, are actually round in the back, because jellies have no directional swim, and so they need that circular current in their tank in order to thrive. So that's something else that we might think of when we start thinking about what are these spaces going to look like. The next thing is, what are they going to look like? Our designer Glenn, he had a really great quote. He said, "Fortunately, most fish live in beautiful environments," which helps make his job a little bit easier. The tank behind me is no exception. We draw inspiration from a lot of different places. Some working with these species, seeing what others used in aquariums have done. It might be from observing them in the wild. Jeremy has actually been down to Australia to see these animals in the wild and can draw on that experience to help care for, but also to think about exhibit design here at the aquarium. You might also look for inspiration from other sources, and I have one behind me here for our Sea Dragons tank. Jeremy was able to find a magazine from National Geographic all about the Tasmanian Sea, which is where these guys are coming from. And I'll actually pull open a page that helps to inform our tank behind us. So if you look at the image on this page, you can see our amazing design team and exhibits team really did an awesome job of transporting our visitors right to the place where these animals are living, which is pretty incredible. Now comes the how. This is probably the most complicated part of the process. So there's a lot of choices that go into what, and once we get to the what, we have to actually make this beautiful thing come to life. So it's not a super linear process, and in fact a lot of different parts of the process happen at the same time as other parts, and different challenges and needs arise. The more we learn about the animals, the more we kind of think through the process. So it has to be a pretty flexible process that can change and evolve based on new needs. But typically what happens is kind of those critical issues and those critical needs kind of rise to the top and help form what you're actually seeing on exhibit. So first comes tank design. We have to design what this thing is going to look like. So once we kind of figure out what we're going to put in it, what our restrictions are, we start thinking about things like how to keep the fish visible. A lot of the animals that we have on exhibit are things that are going to naturally hide. The sea dragons are no exception. They're pretty shy animals, so how do we create a habitat in which they are going to feel comfortable even all the way up at the front of the glass, so our visitors have a really good eye on them? Sometimes this involves a little bit more creative animal care. My favorite example of this is actually for our electric eel exhibit. That animal has a special feeding contraption at the very front of its tank that feeds that animal at the front of the exhibit. So anytime that animal is looking for a snack, she's right up at the front of the tank, which is pretty incredible. Some other things we got to think about: reflection, how the light's going to bounce around in the space. How are we going to light the tank from the inside? How are we going to light the exhibits from the outside? We got to think about condensation. Is it a warm tank? Is it a cold tank? What's the tank going to be made out of? Most of our exhibits are faced with acrylic, which maybe you might not know. A lot of people think it's glass. It's not. It's actually acrylic. And then we work with a company that will actually physically build the tank itself, so the box that we are putting all of the habitat in. And we have a company, an outside company, that builds the physical box that we're kind of building all of the other pieces in. Then we got to think about the habitat design. So this is where Peter and his amazing team come in. They will make a small model of this. They'll bring it back to Glenn in exhibits and someone like Jeremy who's in fishes, and they'll say, "Hey guys, what do you think? Is this an accurate representation of the habitat? Is this going to be good for the animals? Aesthetically, is it beautiful to look at? Is it going to work?" And then everybody kind of comes together, they think about it, and then they can make adjustments. And then once they decide this is the direction that we want to go, Peter and his team will build a life-size model of the exhibit. So they'll start building pieces out of plywood and foam, and then they'll use that life-size model in order to build the fiberglass pieces and the exhibit elements that you're seeing in the tank behind me, which is pretty incredible. We also have to think about life support. How do we keep these animals alive, right? These guys would be hanging out in the ocean, so how do we make the ocean happen on land? The short answer is a whole lot of plumbing. And the aquarists are actually the ones that do the plumbing with assistance from our amazing facilities crew, but they're literally behind these tanks installing plumbing, crawling underneath, around them, thinking about how water is going to flow through the tank, how do we maintain water temperature, all of these crazy things that you might not ever think of. And when it comes to actually installing that life support system, it's pretty much all hands on deck. So not just the aquarists for this gallery, but really aquarists from all over the building, especially for really large projects. It's really all hands on deck, which is pretty incredible. Then Peter and his amazing team come in. His assistant, her name is Keely. They are going to install these exhibits literally piece by piece, covering every seam, installing every individual piece of coral, making it look like one seamless, gorgeous habitat, as if it had grown in the tank the whole time. I think one of the more impressive versions of this is probably our giant ocean tank, right? We're talking about a 23-foot tall reef that was literally built piece by Peter and his team and installed piece by piece in that tank in order to replicate that amazing ecosystem. And so pretty much any habitat you're seeing around the aquarium was physically created by Peter Brady and his team, which is kind of awesome. Then you got to think about other sorts of needs. Mechanical, we got to put water in this thing, make sure the water is safe for the animals, and that includes our environmental quality team. Then we got to get the animals. So while this whole thing is happening, we're slowly acquiring animals, doing quarantine. All of our animals have to go through at least a 30-day holding period to make sure there's nothing in them or on them that could make our other animals sick. And then once they get the thumbs up, then they can go on exhibit. So it's really a long process with a lot of steps, often that happen at the same time, involving a lot of different humans. And the reason that we're talking about exhibit design now is because we are currently in the process of this. So coming this spring in our tropical gallery, we are going to have our largest viewing window tank opening right below actually where I'm standing now. So it's going to feature an Indo-Pacific reef community. And it will be a floor-to-ceiling window that will be concave. So you'll actually be able to walk towards the tank and feel like you're totally surrounded, which will just make it a really beautiful, immersive exhibit, getting to see and highlight animals that are maybe similar to the animals in the giant ocean tank, but would be geographically in a wildly different location. And being able to kind of think about, why are these animals looking the way that they do? Why do they act the way that they do? Why are they different from the animals in the giant ocean tank? So a really cool opportunity to be able to feature some new beautiful reef fish for you guys. It's also going to be one of our most diverse tanks. We're going to have tons of different species of reef fish in that exhibit. And also behind the scenes, it's incredibly high tech. So we're using a lot of new technology, a lot of really cool life support system stuff, which is going to just make that exhibit shine. So we're really excited for you guys to be able to see that. And again, that's going to be coming this spring. So keep your eyes out for our wonderful marketing and communications team to start sharing that with you guys. But that's been happening behind the scenes for months and months, involving all of those people that we've been talking about, kind of using this entire process. And so we're pretty excited about that. And we can't wait to show you guys. At this point, do we have any questions?
Where were the sea dragons while the exhibit was closed?
Amazing question. So where were the sea dragons when the exhibit was closed? So actually, the guys that are in here right now were living behind the scenes. When we get sea dragons, we get them pretty small, and they have to do a lot of growing behind the scenes, and things like learning how to eat frozen food. So that process is happening with these guys in tanks in the gallery that we couldn't see. But we did already have a lot of animals in this exhibit, so those guys went to our offsite facility in Quincy. So Jeremy actually had to go build a holding tank in Quincy for the sea dragons to move to while they were off exhibit.
Does your staff make it a habit to go to the environment you're building, or is it possible to create an environment that's realistic without ever having been there?
Yeah, that's another really great question. Do we have to physically see this place in the wild? The short answer, I would say, is no, simply because a lot of aquariums are really collaborative. So we know that we can go just the state over and see a habitat that is representing the ecosystem that we're trying to build, as opposed to traveling all the way across the world, we're probably just going to go a state over and see how they're doing it. Also, again, things like those images from National Geographic, the magic of the internet, we can really get a lot of source information. The other thing that I will say is Peter Brady and his team are incredibly good at what they do. They have a lot of experience taking something that is an image or an inspiration and turning it into physical art, into the habitats that you're seeing here in the building. So I would say, based on knowledge that we can attain closer to home and the expertise of the folks that are collaborating to put together these exhibits, it's not necessary to go to the places where they're from. It's always nice, it's always helpful if we can, but it's not something that always happens.
And how do you keep the exhibits clean?
How do you keep the exhibits clean? So that is part of life support, is filtration. There's a lot of filtration, a lot of different types of filtration that clean the water and pull things out of the water, things like fish poo that we don't want in there, but also it involves the Aquarius actually physically getting into that space in order to do things like scrub the coral, wash the windows, vacuum the pebbles on the floor. So there's a lot of elbow grease behind keeping the exhibits clean, and that's also a big part of why that team is involved in designing things, because they're the ones that have to be able to maintain it. So they really got to know that tank inside and out.
Do you know where these sea dragons came from?
Where these sea dragons came from. So we work with a gentleman who is based out of Australia. There's actually only a handful of people in the entire world that have permits to collect sea dragons from the wild. There isn't a place that is consistently raising them in human care yet. There's a number of institutions working on this right now, but all of our sea dragons come from the wild. So what they do is actually pretty cool. What they'll do is they'll go out and they'll look for dads that are carrying eggs. So sea dragons, just like seahorses, it's dad that cares for the babies, not mom. And sea dragons, unlike seahorses, they don't have a pouch to hold those eggs. They have kind of a spongy patch on the bottom of their tail. So the eggs are visible while dad is carrying them. They'll go out, they'll look for eggs. When they find them, this gentleman brings them back to his facility. He will raise them from eggs, and once they're big enough to travel, we ship them from Australia. They do a little pit stop in California, and then usually Jeremy flies out to California and flies them back. So it's a pretty intensive process getting the sea dragons here, because they are wild caught, and sea dragons only live in one place in the entire world, and that's Southern Australia, which is literally on the opposite side of the globe from where we are here in Boston. Any other questions out there for our friends on Facebook Live? Awesome. Well, if you think of questions, as always, feel free to post them in the comments. We'll come back, we'll answer them for you. Thank you all so much for joining us for another First Friday Facebook Live. I hope this got you thinking a little bit about kind of all of the steps and things that have to happen, and all the humans that have to happen in order to make these beautiful exhibits that you're seeing here at the aquarium possible. I do want to again thank Glenn and Jeremy for taking the time to share their work and their knowledge with us in order to help make this Facebook Live happen. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And we hope to see you for our next First Friday Facebook Live on March 1st. Thanks, guys.